Lizard people. Look it up, listeners. The whole publishing industry is full of them. I'm talking agents, editors, all the way down to the authors themselves. You don't believe me? Well, head on down to your local B&N. Go to the horror section, huh? Pluck a book off of the shelf, and I want you to flip to the back flap and feast your eyes on that author shot. You think that's what they really look like, huh? No. Oh, we use your own eyes, people. I'm talking the lamestream media is overtaking the publishing industry right in front of us. You want to know what BNN really stands for? Brain numbing. Huh? Oh, just today I was at the bookstore, and you know what? I plucked a book off the shelf. It was this book called Rekt by Alex Gonzalez. Oh, and then I found this other book called Bat Eater and Other Names for Cora Zeng by Kylie Lee Baker. You think that's what they really look like, huh? You think that's what they really look like? Well, I got another news for you. It's fears, ladies and gentlemen, and I am your host, Clay McLeod Chapman. Thank you very much for tuning in and humoring me. We have an amazing show for you tonight because I think we have picked two of probably the most intense novels that I have read for 2025. And that is saying something. Author of Bat Eater and Other Names for Cora Zeng, it is none other than Kylie Lee Baker. Hello, Kylie. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm great. That was such an exciting intro, and you were spot on. This is not my real face. I'm wearing a human suit, as I
Oh my
always
God.
do.
If you just pulled the mask, I would be you would just
Yeah.
for me, would you do that for me? Author of Rekt, Rekt. Do you feel like you have to like spell it out for people like when you're in conversation?
Yeah,
Yeah.
always. Yeah, and then it's better to say it out loud and then spell it because when people see it first, they always say it wrong, which is
Yeah.
interesting unless they are like my age. You know what I mean?
How do they say it? Like
Yeah.
wrecked?
But
Wrecked?
like I've gotten Wreck-It, I've gotten
Wreck-It.
Reeked,
Oh
I've
no.
gotten Reeked, I've gotten a whole bunch of
Could be a
stuff
very
that I'm
different
like,
book.
okay. Like,
Oh my
well, you're
God.
very much not online, so
This
you're
is
okay, you're safe.
that is the generation gap for you right there.
Yeah.
Author of Wreck-It, it is none other than Alex Gonzalez. Alex, how are you doing?
I'm great. I'm thrilled. I'm so excited to be here. And I also love the radio host intro there. That
You
was kind
know,
of chilling, got a little ghastly, but also
well,
compelling.
well, thank you. I'll take it. Just add that to my Goodreads reviews, and I'll be happy. Well, I mean, you guys, I mean, frankly, like it is a riff off of what I feel like both of your books tend to cover in their own kind of very particular ways, and I feel like the reason why I was so kind of adamant about the pairing of both Wreck-It and Bat Eater is that there there's a lot of similarities to it, and I feel like they're both kind of COVID baby books. Like
Hmm.
I mean I think there's something to be said about writing books within quarantine. One of them specifically kind of speaks to COVID and that kind of time in our life. I think both books focus on trauma in this
Mm.
like unflinching way, where me as the reader really kind of wanted to flinch a couple times, and you don't really, neither of you let us, and I feel like there's something to be said about that. I don't know, it's just really I don't know, very commendable.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
I mean, this is honestly just an opportunity for me to fanboy on books that I love. But also, both of your books kind of focus on extreme forms of isolation and what it's like to go kind of inward, internal, when the world starts closing in and things start to get kind of creepy or weird or just scary. Both of your characters, I think your protagonists have this, you know, there is that moment where, is this real? Is this not real? How much of this is in my head versus how much of it is happening to, like, actually happening to me? And I don't
Yeah, I
know.
think I would even go another even further. I also think for Bat Eater and Rekt, both of the main characters have to like they're witnessing violence all the time,
Yeah.
and we have these two types of people that are exposed to just graphic violence
Yeah.
every other
Yeah,
chapter.
it does something to your brain.
Yeah, exactly. And I think in Wrecked, you know, he goes to the dark side, and Cora becomes our, you know, I guess it's not a spoiler, but has a much more generous arc, and you know, and so it's yeah, I think that I thought that was fascinating as well in terms of parallels. It's just like what can we submit this character to, really?
Yeah, and like you were saying, Clay, I think they're both so gruesome, and I'm glad that you agree. I just love books that take it to the next level like that. But I think they both have this theme that I think is common across a lot of horror novels, but especially so in ours, which is not always being able or willing to look away
Yeah.
from the gross, awful parts of the world.
Yeah.
Because some people don't always have the privilege of being able to do that, or sometimes they want to, but they find that they can't. So I think that's something both of our books also get into.
But you know, it's one thing for the characters to kind of do that, but you as the authors are like, you're bearing witness to these horrors, to these kind of atrocity exhibits that are
Mhm.
happening on the page. And I I guess my first question for both of you is this idea of, like, you know, you're making a pact with the reader here to, like, say, you know, take my hand, we're gonna go through this together, and we're gonna go to some intense places, but
Mhm.
I am not gonna look away, so you can't look away. And you at some point had to make that choice. Like, I am not going to turn away from this crime scene, or I am not going to look away from this snuff film, this video. And
Yeah.
like, that is a choice that, like, I would, I want to believe that maybe there was an editor at some point who was like, maybe we cut this like 2 paragraphs earlier, or like
Yeah.
maybe we don't go too far. But
Yes.
you kept it. You went there. And I mean, it's silly, but like, why? Why did you do that?
You want to know something funny? I actually had a couple offers on Bat Eater when I sold it, and one very nice editor did want me to cut back on the gore. She said that on the offer call, and the other
Mhm.
editor did not feel that way. And guess which one I went with?
Good for you.
Yeah,
Good
but
for
also
you.
because as a YA author who writes quite dark fantasy, there were times in the past where some of my editors very reasonably said, "Kylie, remember this is for children. We need to bring it back a little bit." And I said, "Okay, you're right. That's kind of boring, but like I see your point." So I was very excited for my first adult horror to not have anyone tell me that. Though I will say that I think in both of our books, and also how I feel about horror in general, is I think gore is, and sort of darkness and viscera and all these awful things in our books are not always necessarily there just for shock value. I feel like they really can have a literary purpose. I like to call it tasteful gore, where it's sort
Yeah.
of representative of sort of what I was saying earlier about how it's really not shying away from just how awful the world can be. It's not sanitizing these really dark, awful themes, and it's
Mhm.
forcing the reader to confront things that that makes them uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You know, it's so funny. I totally agree. And I remember hearing someone told me a long time ago about movies. And when you watch a movie, the first 15 minutes is the director showing you or teaching you how to watch this movie.
Mhm.
And I've kind of held on to that when I read books. And you know, I guess gosh, I don't know how much to talk about Bat Eater without spoiling things, but there's gore in the first like 5 pages of it.
Yeah, no, I feel like the first chapter is fair game. That's pretty.
Yeah, okay, cool, right. So
Yeah.
like the first chapter, you're like reading it, and then it's not just any gore, it is like extreme violence, and it's horrific.
Yeah,
But reading it, I was like, oh, now I know what I'm primed. Now I know what the book
exactly.
is capable
You
of,
know what you're in for.
and I know what I'm in for. I
Yeah.
know what I'm gonna get and how early I'm gonna get it, which I think is important to set the reader into that mindset, right? Of like,
Mhm.
you got to be ready for this because it's happening. It's already happening, you know. Boom, 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 boom.
Mhm.
So I thought that was pretty slick.
Thanks.
So is there a certain kind of are we teaching our readers how to read these books or how to like kind of enter into
I've
these
always
stories?
maintained that at least a little bit. I mean, that's as far as teaching as I'd ever go to a reader, to be honest. I don't want to teach any like lessons, but I would teach them how to read the thing they're holding.
Yeah.
I think, personally.
So who is the reader that crosses the line? Like if you draw a line in the sand and you're saying, "Come with me, we're gonna go places," and eh, I don't know, like has there been conversations with readers who have said like this, like kind of articulated their kind of personal experience about reading either of your books? Of like the kind of journey of it, like like I didn't think I could get past that first chapter, or like, but once I entered into that vibe or like the tone of it, like I suddenly became someone like I
Yeah.
you know
I
Yeah.
haven't yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, I was just going to say that's something I've thought a lot about, and my publisher has thought a lot about, because Bat Eater and Other Names for Cora Zeng is technically a horror literary crossover book. So they were thinking very hard about how to sort of trick more literary readers into picking up this book. Like you don't always want to lead with, "Hey, there's a decapitation on page 10,"
Right.
if you want to reach a broader audience. And I have actually heard some readers say, I'm not normally into horror or gore, but I felt like the emotional undercurrent of this journey was worth it. And I felt like the horror elements supported that. And so I didn't mind it as much. And I think that goes back to what I was saying earlier about how gore can be strategic, and not always just
Oh,
unnecessary.
so for your strategy was to get literary people invested into the gore.
I don't know if it
And
was my strategy, but it was what we went with.
it's funny because I think mine might have been the opposite. I think mine was probably geared to gore hounds, and then as they're like kind of excited to read something horrific about snuff films, there is like a deeper story of like grief and trauma
Yeah,
and try and
totally.
wanting more for yourself, so to speak. But I do think those angles are good, and I mean, I love horror, and I think that was personally my biggest struggle with the book for me, and I'm wondering if you could relate. Of like, I got worried that the more gore I put in, I'm gonna get that, oh, this is shock, and this is shock, schlocky shock, edgelord type of writing, and then I'd be really like shooting myself in the foot. But I mean, you were already established though, so
I
writing the
suppose.
extreme stuff from YA might have been even almost more to prove. I would wonder, you know?
Well, the thing is, I write very dark YA. It's already described as being pretty gruesome, and that's when I wasn't
Mm.
trying to be gruesome.
Sure.
So I feel like anyone who's read my YA books has an idea of what they're in for, regardless. Though I will say, I want to go back. I totally agree. Your book, just when you say the word snuff films, it definitely appeals to more hardcore horror
Yeah.
fans. Like in the email chain, you and Clay were saying, "Oh, it's just miserable the whole way through," and then I heard snuff films. I thought, sounds perfect. I'm in. Like I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But then it was also so smart with the way it talked about how technology and AI can be used to make something even more horrific than I could have ever imagined. So it
Yeah.
was so so interesting to read. It was so much more than just as you were
Oh,
saying, just excessive gore or anything you might think just when you see the word snuff films.
thank you. Well, I think what's super fun about Bat Eater is that it's almost like it's if my guy is watching the snuff films, he's like watching it happen. But I thought yours was so smart because it was the aftermath. And so you're only kind of piecing together like the bloodiest, most horrific crime scene, and then you're puzzling it together of like who could have done this, who could have been capable of this. And then you really don't know if it's a supernatural effect, if it's what is happening specifically. But then even more, there's one intimate chapter early on where she bumps into a jogger and the jogger kind of like assaults her in the sidewalk. That to me was almost the hardest part of the book because it was so intimate and it wasn't like Tarantino, it wasn't anything. It was just like really like actual tangible violence that you see, and that really. The most I cringed in the book was that part when I was like, God,
Yeah.
that fucking is
No,
miserable.
the real world is awful. People always ask me, what's
Yeah.
the hardest part to write? It wasn't the decapitation.
Yeah, it's
It
the
was the
hate.
racism. That was
Yeah,
much
yeah.
harder.
Yeah, I bet. Oh gosh, yeah,
The
totally. I
decapitation
felt
was
that.
fun.
Yeah, isn't it? It is a lot of fun. Yeah, coming up with the snuff film titles is kind of a hoot. I was like, you know, because
That
you don't
was
even have to
fun.
describe them. Like I was telling you, like you don't really have to describe the video if you get a punchy enough title
Yeah,
for the video.
exactly. You
Yeah.
can imagine. And that's sort of the same thing with the crime scenes too. Like I think what you can imagine is often worse than what you can actually see.
Yeah, yeah, especially yeah, 100%. So I really, really thought that was pretty slick. Yeah.
Guys, I can't imagine the person listening to this who has no idea what either of your books are about yet.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask Alex, if you had to do the kind of elevator pitch, the kind of log line, like
Mm,
what is Reeked about?
yeah. Reeked. Um, Wrecked is about a young man who is suffering immense loss, immense grief after his girlfriend abruptly dies, and he kind of feels abandoned, and he does not have proper coping skills, proper therapy skills, and instead of actually trying to get help, he seeks comfort in watching gore sites and snuff films and intense wrecked videos online, and then that becomes a rabbit hole of addiction, and he is given a website for an AI generated snuff film content that generates and predicts how everyone will die. He falls into this whole crypto gambling AI snuff film rabbit hole, and yeah, it's a lot, as you can imagine. It's a lot of describing snuff and then kind of hoping for this guy to come out on the other side. Yeah.
And you started writing this book in
Mhm.
2020.
Yeah.
And I know it started as a short story and then it kind of blossomed into a novel. But I'm thinking of the kind of prescience of a book that is kind of speaking specifically to AI and deep
Yeah.
fakes and like what is it like to put out this book today? I mean, this book came out just this week. So, like, you were entering into a world where science fiction, like the science fiction that you have posited, is
Yeah.
now we are
Happening.
bristling on science fact. And was that
Yeah, yeah,
always the
really.
case? Like, were you like,
Well, I
yeah,
think I mean, I'm not like a ginormous sci-fi guy. I do read a lot of it, but I think it's a lot harder to predict sci-fi that's too far in the future, frankly. That's too hard for me. I don't know how people do that when they have like really well-researched colonies on planets and all of this stuff, and like that's fucking crazy. I was just like looking at the news headlines and what we were living in, and you honestly like guessing myself of like what is the most likely thing that could happen or is already happening. And so when
but
you
it
think of
was,
like AI and you think of tech bros and you think of gambling, it's a pretty straight shot, you know? If they're using it, you know, not to be blue about it, but if they're using AI and deepfake to make porn, I'm confident that they're using it to show, you know, dead people, right?
yeah, was it something that you were always like, this is a matter of time?
Yeah, 100%.
and
I was pretty confident about it.
And did you want to be in front of it, alongside it? Like in your mind, like if this is coming down the pike, like the book hits the shelves and it's either a
Yeah.
world we already live in or it's coming.
I think I
So
needed to be like side by side with it.
yeah.
Because if you come out in front of it, everyone's going to be like, oh, they're not going to take it as seriously. And if you come out behind it, then you already missed the boat. But if
Yeah.
you come out like neck and neck with it, and I've always maintained like the book is in no way above it. It's scared of it and it's horrified of it, but I have just as much of a conflicted relationship with the internet as all of us. I'm in it as well. It's impossible to not be in it. So the book was not preachy in that regard, but it's more like looking around, gesturing wildly and screaming is kind of the idea, you know?
Screaming into the void. Um, but now that the book is out, like,
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to be cheeky, but like, have you gotten any spam? Have you been hacked? Have you been like, has your like
Not yet.
algorithm shifted to the extent where it's
Yeah. I'm
like
waiting for it, to be
Oh
honest. I
God,
am
knock on
waiting
yeah,
wood.
for it. Because I'm seeing it, I'm like wondering like when it's gonna creep onto that type. But luckily the people, at least in theory, the people that pick up the book and read the book are kind of like of my same mindset of like, yeah, I'm wanting to read something that scares me, or that I'm already scared of. But the most I've gotten has actually been like really sweet fan mail through my Squarespace. So It's people that feel, because it is as fucked up as it is, there is a deep sense of nostalgia to the book of like growing up watching the internet before you were supposed to, before you even knew what your parents didn't even know what the internet was. So the fan mail I've gotten from that has been really weirdly wholesome of like, yeah, wow, you really reminded me of a time I had forgotten about, you know, like it was kind of crazy that we had to watch those things. And that is a degree that is like a weird sweet through line of the book.
Do you remember your first snuff film?
Yeah, you know
Your
what? People
first.
do. They do, you know, they always do, which is kind of fun.
I
Yeah.
mean, geez, I'm gonna date myself and say, like, for me, it was something like Faces of Death, where it's like
Sure.
you're like at the video store and it's like, did you hear about the movie that has like all the like the real stuff in it? So like I was pre-internet, but like I I gotta ask, like, do you remember your first like video
Yeah.
that you should not have watched at that slumber party with all of your friends?
Yeah, I do, I do. And for anybody listening, I'm happy to retell it to you. Yeah, I remember it, and I'm sure you remember it too. It's this video called Split Face,
Oh God.
and it's absolutely horrific. And it's this young guy, and you know, it's the handy cam footage because that's all it was. And it's this young guy. He jumps off of a bridge into the river, but he doesn't clear the landing, and he smashes along this concrete pylon. And you see this blossom of blood, and all of his friends are screaming out of their mind because they just saw their friend lose his face. And then it cuts to an over-the-head shot of like a surgeon table, and again, someone snuck in this fucking camera, and they're like trying to push this guy's head together, and he obviously is fucking dead. There's no head left, and they're like smushing his face together, and it's just called Split Face, and it has a share button. And I watched it at a sleepover, and I was like 11, you know? And then you're
Oh
like,
God.
great. I can't tell my parents about this because they'll never let me use the computer. They won't even understand what the hell it is. I can't tell anybody, teachers, nobody. You can't tell an adult about this. So you're just kind of sitting with it. But the book is nice because a lot of people have come forward and been like, I remember my first video, or I remember a video that fucked me up. And then you're like, someone mentioned the other day, gosh, I don't, we probably all watched it. This was during Iraq times, the soldier throwing the puppy off the cliff. Do they remember that video? It's like this guy, he's a soldier, he's like talking some bullshit, and he has this little puppy, and he just pitches it off of a cliff, and it's
Jesus.
fucking terrible. I watched it like in like 8th grade. That was
We'll put a hyperlink in the comments. So
yeah. Like, share, subscribe.
With that is, I cannot think of a better segue into asking this question. Alex, is it story time? Will you regale us with a little bit of rekt, please?
Yes, 100%. It's absolutely story time, folks. Gather around the digital fire. It's story time. So I have this part here. My main guy, he's back from college. He's hanging out in his childhood home in Tampa. And at this point, he's pretty deep in his problem. So he's spiraling, he's watching gore sites, and he's also coping by making up creepypastas online. So he's just kind of being a lurker creep online. And so this is him at home, and he's about to get a really ominous link. Back home in my bedroom turned guest room, I opened my laptop and logged back onto campfirefables.com. I felt a bizarre sense of nostalgia as I scrolled through the trending submissions and the anonymous in-character posts of cryptid sightings. It was only after a moment before I felt someone in the room with me. This was how my stories always started. Some buffoon came home late at night and felt bad for himself, like me, right then. And shortly after, the buffoon heard the soft crying of a grown man under his bed. Then the wax man shimmied out first the top of his hat, then his face, noseless, a thick layer of old wax covering his skull, the crying coming from within, muffled and desperate for air. For context, the wax man is a creepypasta that my main guy makes up to cope with death. To me, before I quit writing the creepypastas, the essence of the crying was always most important. It was never a crying of pain, but rather a crying of despair. It was the crying of a man having fucked up so bad that he couldn't blame anyone but himself. The crying was always key. Some users submitted Waxman posts that piggybacked off mine, but they never got the soul of it right. They had Waxman crying with rage or crying from heartbreak, but that always missed the mark. If you put a gun to my head and asked me why the crying had to be just right, I'd just stare at you blankly. Somewhere deep in my lizard brain, the gears would have turned, but I wouldn't be able to verbalize it. I've tried to dissect it myself a few times, but it always felt like one of those kitchen cabinets that never opened and seemed to be there for design. But if you look closely through the gap, you can see something made its way in there, something you forgot about, something maybe you locked away on purpose. I sat there in the dark and I wrote a cutesy post titled Waxman Lives. I made up a quick little paragraph about a young girl at a boarding school who found the Waxman in her closet, and he came in and had his way with her before she was found dead and clumped in white folds. Within moments of posting it, my piece was deleted. A banner fell across my page saying, "Detected harmful violence, sexual violence against minors and students." Yeah, that's the point, I said, refreshing the page. This is bogus. I tried to change some verbiage and post it again, but my post limit was maxed. What the fuck happened to this website? I heard myself mutter. I was about to close my laptop when a message opened up on my screen. It was from Horospecs. They were online right now. I noticed you were posting again. Missed your stuff. The letters were green against the black and gray background of the site. Skull sprites twirled in the margins of the screen. The site was hokey, no two ways about it. I replied back with my initial thought, what the fuck happened to this site? Woke mob got to it. I wasn't sure how to respond. I registered as a Democrat in Leon County my freshman year, but I figured Horospecs didn't need to know that. Use this site instead, they said. Chinsky.rekt.x. Yeah, you sent this already. I thought it was spam. It's a good community, they said. We're all big fans of Bluebird. I was flattered at first by the comment, but then quickly put off by the idea that I had a following. And if that were true, how long had I had one? I clicked on Horospecs' page and I found 0 submissions and 0 comments, but that they'd been active since around my freshman year, maybe even earlier. I clicked back on the message thread and studied the combination of letters. I copied and pasted it into a fresh tab. Please don't give me a virus. Please don't give me a virus, I chanted as I pressed enter. The link took me nowhere. I messaged Horospecs again. It didn't go anywhere. Are you using a Mac? Yeah, is that bad? Download Spyglass. It's a browser, thegoodbooty.org. I clicked the link and it took me to a picture of a cartoon skeleton in pirate gear. It was animated and a file nestled in the treasure chest blinked at me, asking to be installed. Is this Tor or something? LOL. Tor is for pussies. Spyglass is legit. What the fuck is this site anyway? Is it stories? LMAO. I started downloading Spyglass. You see, links for the dark web don't look like Google or Facebook or often have intelligible words. There are random letters and numbers like 4UWJAB FMR5I29QH.onion. Onion being the domain a browser like Tor can access. But Tor was for pussies, evidently, and Spyglass, well, to be frank, I had no idea where to even start. In truth, the idea of crossing the threshold into the dark web had been kicking around my head for some time. I was getting bored of the casual gore I've been watching, and I wanted the next thing. I still wasn't sure what that meant or if I could handle it, but I looked at the link from Horospecs one more time. Chinsky.rekt.x. Let's see what happens, I said. I ran Spyglass, pasted the link, clicked it, and the screen flickered and went gray, and I got a pinwheel. My laptop fan started whirring and getting warm. Afraid it was going to keel over, I forced quit Spyglass and let the little guy catch its breath. I messaged Horospecs again. The link still isn't working. It took a while, but eventually they hit me back. Uncover your webcam. Yeah, fucking right. Don't be a fag. I studied the painter's tape on my webcam. Could it really be dependent on a visual? It made me uneasy. Fuck it, I thought. I restarted Spyglass and went to the site. I reached forward and ripped off the tape. First, the webcam glowed green and blinked at me. Then my computer whirred to life. Not as mad as before, and it settled into a hum as the page loaded. The website was garish, just hideous. Everything was neon yellow and the borders were red and dripped with blood. Even the ratio of the screen felt outdated, like it was meant for a computer with a cathode tube in the back. The contrast of the screen killed my eyes, and I waited a second for the page to populate. After a while, there was only one link, and it was scrawled in some phony, scary font. Car accident on Monroe Avenue. I went numb. It took a second for me to move. If the link was what I thought it was, there was simply no going back. I heard wheezing in my room. It was underneath me, somewhere close. I clicked the video and I watched it. It was CCTV footage from the nearby streetlight. It was unmistakably of Ellery's Nissan, the license plate, the bumper sticker of our high school volleyball team, the Johnny Bravo bobble on the antenna. And just like that, I watched her get sideswiped by a truck going 80. The car flipped over like garbage. The truck spun out and fell into a bar ditch. Scrap metal and glass blew out like fireworks. I sat back and tried to catch my breath. I closed my eyes and the footage played in the murky dark. I saw it in my brain, the way her Nissan crumbled on its pitch and yaw, the doors flinging open like cut wings. Her neck probably snapped, the roof crushed down on her head. I shut my laptop and I threw it into the hamper. I paced back and forth in my tiny room. I wanted to scream, but imagined waking up my parents on the other side of the house. I stifled it and I bit into a pillow. My lips quivered and I took a breath and I sat on the hardwood floor and I pressed my knuckles into the cold floor. After about an hour, I gathered my senses. I dug my laptop out of my clothes and opened it to see if what I had saw was actually real. And it was. The soul link was still there looking at me. And so I watched it again. Thank you. Thank you.
It's just so gnarly, and that is just the beginning. That is
that's right when he gets the damn site, and it's all downhill from there.
I love the wax man too, by the way.
Thank you.
Right?
I really appreciate that.
So creepy.
I'm very surprised at the love I got for the wax man. I thought he was just putzing around the whole damn book.
No, it is super nostalgic, like you were saying before. I mean, I personally didn't watch snuff films growing up, but I did know a lot about creepypasta, so that was very nostalgic.
I will say, like, the creepypasta element, that was so hard. I really respect those creepypasta writers. They're so good. And like I could not, like, I was like, how do I make Waxman convincing? Because the best creepypastas, they feel like they're like the amount of research and lore, and I'm really blown away by that.
Still thinking about them like 15 years later.
Yeah, facts.
Kylie, were you a creepypasta person? Like, did you delve into the web and kind of read the lore and
I definitely knew the more popular ones. Like I knew the No End House and of course Slender Man and like the Russian sleep experiment and stuff like that. It wasn't my main like after school activity, but I was familiar. I dabbled around a little.
Yeah.
They're out there,
Had you ever thought about contributing or kind of writing your own versions of kind of the creepypasta stories?
Oh, that's so intimidating.
Yeah,
sort of like how Alex was saying. I don't know. I don't feel confident I could write something that people would still want to think about so many years in the future.
They'll smell you too if you're a poser. They could totally tell if you're a fake, man.
Yeah.
Kylie, when did you start writing?
Oh, like seriously, or just?
I mean, when did the bug first bite?
I was always writing when I was a kid, just on just pieces of paper all around the house. I was always writing stories. I think I started taking it more seriously in college when I declared my creative writing major and started taking classes, but I always wanted to write.
And was it something that you would be doing it regardless of taking a class and just the kind of stories started?
Yeah, I think so. Like I did it because I could double major, and so I could have a practical major and then my fun major. So I got to have more fun when I was in college. Yeah. Sorry?
What was the practical major?
Spanish, which is funny because I have not made a penny from speaking Spanish.
That is so funny. That's really funny.
I do want to kind of name check your YA work, because I do think it's really interesting how there are 3 novels. There's the Keeper of the Night duology, and then there's the Scarlet Alchemist. And like, congratulations on being a New York Times bestseller.
I'm not a New York Times bestseller.
Wait, no. Wait, did I get that
Sunday
wrong?
Times, Sunday Times.
Sunday Times. The Times.
Some
We'll just say
someday maybe New York Times, but thank you. Just
the
the
Times.
shock I felt when you said that. I was like, oh my God.
The Times loves you. The Times, you made it to the Times. Sign of the Times.
One of the times. One of those.
One of these days, one of these times. But YA has been your kind of the world that you've existed in.
Yeah.
So then to say, I'm going to write an adult novel. I am going
Mhm.
to shift. Was there ever a concern on your part of like how that would be taken? Like, would readers follow you? Would it be kind of like trying to carve out a whole other kind of niche? What were those kind of initial decisions for you?
Well, at the time, I didn't worry too much about crossover because I write pretty dark young adult fantasy. So I'm already kind of, I mean, not to be like people know me in the community, but just for the people who are aware of me and my writing, they know that I write very dark things anyway. So it wasn't like I was writing rom-coms and then suddenly this dark, gruesome adult horror. So
Mhm.
even though it definitely is a whole other level from my YA work, it's not too crazy of a transition. And it's actually something I've always wanted to do. I actually grew up reading a lot more horror than I did fantasy, but I didn't know if I could write horror well because I'm such a visual person. And I think it's so much harder to scare people with a book than in a movie. But then when I published The Keeper of Night, people said, Kylie, this is terrifying. And I said, really? Because I didn't try to make it terrifying. So then I thought, what would happen if I tried to write something scary?
Yeah.
And that's why I wrote Bat Eater.
I mean, I will say I have never been more afraid of watching someone eat an orange as
Yeah.
having read Bat Eater. Like that to me is something that
Was that the
will linger.
scariest part of the book?
Yeah,
Just
I
this
mean,
peel and all, just
yes.
swallow it.
Like that was, I mean, because I smelled like there was something like it was just like such a distinct moment and like I was there. Also the phrase, oh my God, needle thin
Oh yeah,
neck.
yeah, the needle neck ghost. Yeah, yeah.
Needle thin neck. Like just saying those three words, like stringing those three words together
Yeah.
to me was so evocative. But I mean, I feel like I want to go back to your point of the you speaking specifically about gore and kind of violence and how you use how you're trying to kind of lure a more literary minded audience or readership
Yeah.
into reading something that may kind of veer into genre.
Mhm.
um I mean, I want to say that I think the tableaus of your crime scenes are so painterly. I not to use a kind of TV reference, but it reminded me of Hannibal, of like the kind of the majesty of like taking in a visual cue of violence. Like we're seeing the effect, but we're not seeing the cause. And like, to
Mhm.
Alex's point, it's like we're almost playing out these mysteries now of like how did this happen? Like how did we get to this? Um, but it is oddly painterly to me.
Thanks.
Just the prose itself that like I found myself being kind of seduced into your violence. And that
That's the
is
goal.
and then you give me the needle neck woman. And that's where the real horror comes
Yeah,
from.
such a horrifying image. As soon as I learned that that existed, I thought this is awful and I need to make it everyone else's problem now
Yeah. It's
to make
really
sure as many
fascinating.
people know about it as possible.
Yeah. It was
And is
really,
that
and I
speaking
know we gotta do the reading, but it was really fascinating that like, did you do the needle neck? Because you paint so much gore and real flesh and bone. So then to describe the ghost, it's like if you did the ghost first, we wouldn't have a visceral image of the ghost. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
But because you do the blood and guts first, when the ghost comes, it's like I know the physical parameters of this ghost because
Mhm.
I've seen what carnage looks like. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And when you say when I found out that this existed,
Mhm.
are you speaking specifically to the notion of a hungry ghost? Like, is
Or a
that
needle neck ghost.
a needle neck ghost?
Yeah.
I mean, can you walk us through the kind of the discovery process? Like, were you reading? It just kind of popped up. Like, Where did you find
Yeah,
it?
I mean, so I was already peripherally aware of the concept of the Hungry Ghost Festival. It's something specific to Chinese culture in a lot of East and Southeast Asian countries, which is just the idea that there's this month of the year when all the ghosts come back from hell and you need to feed them to honor them. And then at the end of the month, they peace out and they go back to where they came from. So I was interested in writing something about that because I hadn't seen any horror based around it to my knowledge. And then the more I poked around, learning specific types of hungry ghosts, the more gruesome it got. And then when I saw, I can't find it now. It's almost like it's almost like it never really existed. It's just been haunting me. Just this one image of a needle neck ghost with, normal sized head but horribly thin neck. I thought this is what I need to write about. I need to make sure the world knows how awful this is.
And how long did you hold on to that? Like, was that something that you put in your pocket for a while before, like, writing Bad Eater, or was it like just
Oh, not
started
long.
writing
Bad
Bad Eater and
Eater,
there was?
yeah, Bad Eater came together pretty quickly. Because I always, I knew I wanted to write a book sort of about COVID and anti-Asian hate crimes, and then I was so intrigued by the idea of also making it paranormal at the same time, not just a slasher book, but also involving these Asian women coming back for revenge, which I think is
Mhm.
fun. I think people like revenge plots. So I was excited by the idea of combining the two.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because the book itself is such a fusion of genres. Like, I mean, I feel like there's like, is it a, there's this thread of like a serial killer mystery, like a who done it or a why done it, and then
Mhm.
there's the kind of a character portrait of watching someone kind of psychologically unravel. There is the kind of the ghost story, the kind of supernatural
A
element.
lot going on.
There's a pandemic narrative, like the cultural critique.
Mhm.
Speaking specifically to kind of racism in New York, if not the country, if not the world. And I feel as if the kind of the melding of all of these kind of genres into one narrative seamlessly, it it's is there a question there? I'm just paying a compliment. Like I'm
Oh,
just
well, thank you. It's all very chaotic. It feels like this book is the most honest reflection of my brain. There's just a carousel on fire, just spinning faster and
Yeah.
faster.
well, I mean, I guess my craft question is like, is it that like at a certain point you're like, well, I guess I have to like now it's time to like integrate a little bit of the ghost story again, and like, oh, now I have to go back to the mystery, or
Mm.
is it just does it all kind of like clamor in together naturally?
I honestly felt like it was pretty easy to fit together because for the first part of the book, right, you're trying to draw out the monster reveal for as
Mhm.
long as possible. Like for both plots, it's just I know there are a lot of things going on, but it to me when writing it felt like there were really only two plots I was alternating between. There
Mhm.
was the serial killers and the hungry ghosts, and then everything with the pandemic and Cora's mental
Yeah.
illness is sort of just the backdrop that is always there
Mhm.
impacting everything. So it wasn't too hard, I think, to just go back and forth and balance those two things as I was going along, especially in the beginning when everything is very subtle because you don't want to
Yeah.
give away too much yet.
How the heck did you get a COVID novel past a publisher? I have been told time and time again that like no COVID, no COVID. Like we're like nobody wants to talk about COVID. Like COVID is just like don't
Mm.
do it, don't do it. But you did it. It's like it's the
Yeah.
you're the exception to the rule, and I want to know how goddamn it, how did you do it?
I mean, I can't tell you what the editors were thinking. I definitely have heard from other authors that they tried to write books with COVID that were not able to get past acquisition. So all I really have are theories. I think part of it is that I think we sold this in like 2022. So it wasn't like right in 2020. There had been a little bit of time. And I guess the other thing I could guess might be the reason is that COVID is such an important part of the book and it's saying something about COVID and the way it impacted society. It's not just an unrelated story where COVID is also happening. And I don't know for a fact that that's what other people's books were. But I do think that probably the way my book weaves it into the story makes a stronger case for why it's important to be told. Because
Mhm.
I think if there's a book in which you could easily remove COVID without significantly changing the story, I can imagine that a lot of more conservative publishers would be inclined to say, well, why don't we just take it out just to be safe?
Yeah.
But you can't take it out of this book.
Yeah. But I mean, God, when you get to the end with your kind of final note, and just kind of speaking specifically in the acknowledgments, like it really kind of hits hard. And I guess I'm curious, like, has there been a conversation since the book has been released with readers where they kind of speak specifically to maybe their own kind of personal experiences with hate crimes, or the notion of like, I read this book and it made me feel this, or it brought something to kind of light in terms of like what I am going through. Like, has there been much communication with readers?
Um, so it's not out in the US yet. So it is out in
Oh.
the UK. So I have had, I have come across some reviews that I've been tagged in, or I do occasionally search for only the 5-star reviews on Goodreads. I try not to make a habit of it, because I know you're not supposed to, but I don't look at the other ones. Don't worry, you can say whatever you want. But the main thing that I've seen is people saying, I had no idea that it was like this for Asian Americans. It seems to be mostly white readers who are saying this. And I mean, that's great. I'm glad that they were open to hearing about an experience of the pandemic that is different from their own. I haven't seen too many Asian people coming out with their own experiences. I mean, some people have certainly said, this really encapsulated the way I felt at the time. And a lot of my friends and beta readers are also Asian, and they had similar thoughts. Though I think just by nature of the book community at large, it is more white people than Asian women. So I think the main response has been just, wow, this is an interesting new perspective, which I appreciate.
Yeah. When does the book come out in the US? What's the release date?
April 29th.
Oh my God, here it
Here it
comes.
comes. It's coming.
Are you like, is there going to be a tour? Like, are we kind of diving into the deep end?
Well, as of right now, I do have a launch event in Boston where I live with Paul Tremblay, which is very cool. I'm super excited about that. He's so nice. So,
well, another thing that links you guys together, Paul blurbed Rekt. So
did he really? Oh, wow. Well, he has good taste.
Yeah.
Honestly, numerous people talk about reviews. Numerous people have either told me directly or left in a review that they only picked it up because Paul blurb on the cover.
Wow, his influence.
I know.
His blurb is on
like,
my cover too. Marketing is really leveraging his name.
Yeah. Oh shit. That's our link thing.
That's the Tremblay effect. You know, you put his name on the front of your cover.
Yeah, it's so great. He's so generous with blurbs. It's very nice.
Yeah, he's really, really sweet guy.
So Kylie, I gotta ask, we're dying to hear from the book. Like, have you read from the book yet in public?
No, actually, I don't. Oh, I think I did a brief reading on a podcast, but not in public.
So this is quasi exclusive. Like, we almost can say we'll flub it.
We can say
that. Done. Exclusive. Is it story time? Can we hear from Bat Eater?
We sure can.
Yay.
Oof, I can not rip my dust jacket off. Okay, so I'm gonna read a bit from the second chapter. This is a few months after Cora's sister is killed and she's working as a crime scene cleaner. August 2020. There are skull fragments jammed in the grout of Yu Shihe's bathroom. Cora pinches them between her gloved fingers, wiggles until the tiles release them, leaving tiny holes behind. Brains pool in the bathtub around her feet, but Cora is swaddled deep in the cocoon of her hazmat suit, and somehow she feels safer here than at home wearing only her own skin. She drops the skull fragment in a biohazard bag and scans the wall, which is now full of thin marks where the pieces lodged themselves, memories of the final gunshot. There's still all the hair and the brains and the skin flaps, but those things wash away easily. Cora prefers bathroom cleanups. Fresh blood almost always scrubs out of tiles with enough bleach, but carpets are hardly ever salvageable. They have to cut out the bloody sections and leave gaping holes behind, so even though the families won't see the blood and guts anymore, they'll know exactly where it was. They can imagine it, and imagining is sometimes worse than seeing. There's some in the vents, says the voice of Harvey Chen from behind Cora. In his hazmat suit, he's just a lumpy yellow silhouette that could be anyone in the world. But his voice is undeniably Harvey, perpetually whining a few decibels too loud to be polite. It's fine in the hazmat suit, but even when he takes it off, he always yells like he's forgotten he's no longer wrapped in plastic. Harvey's uncle owns a dry cleaning shop in Chinatown that expanded into crime scene cleanup, since hardly anyone needs their dry cleaning done during a pandemic, but a surprising number of people need brains scrubbed off their walls, and even cheapskate families don't like doing that kind of thing themselves. Cora came for a job cleaning clothes and left with a job cleaning entrails. Harvey fumbles with a screwdriver through his thick gloves and starts unscrewing the vent panel. We don't know how deep into the vents this shit went, he says. Probably not that far, Cora says. After all, it was a bullet to the head, not a grenade. She doesn't bother raising her voice, even though the hazmat suit will swallow her words, but for all his loudness, Harvey has impeccable hearing. If we miss a piece, it'll get sucked into another apartment, Harvey says. Hairy skull pieces raining down on unsuspecting families. Actually, that would be kind of hilarious. Maybe we shouldn't clean the vents. Cora isn't sure which part of that is supposed to be hilarious. Harvey understands blood and gore in the way of people who play a lot of video games, finds it exciting the way you only can when it's not yours. Cora knows it's not his fault. He's just a horror movie junkie trying to make rent, and there's no harm in finding what joy you can in a dirty and depressing job that someone has to do. Being around him makes it easier to pretend that this is all just special effects on a movie set because he's so utterly unfazed by it all. Cora once thought crime scene cleaners would be intimately familiar with death, but the truth is they never actually see the bodies. The police take them out first and leave the mess behind. In her 4 months working as a crime scene cleaner, Cora has never once seen a corpse. She has only seen one corpse in her whole life. There are filters in the HVAC, Cora says. Skull pieces won't fit through. And this whole building will smell like rotting flesh, Harvey says. You should move in. You'd feel right at home, Ife says, pushing the wet vac into the room. All three of us smell like a hot garbage truck on a good day, Harvey says. Don't throw stones in a glass house, Leo. Ife has already lost interest in Harvey and has started rifling through Yu Shihe's medicine cabinet. It's easy to snatch things from crime scenes because people assume they were ruined from the blood and guts, and the cleanup crew did them a favor by throwing them out. Ife has collected sleeping pills and throw cushions and ceramic cats, and those are only the things Cora noticed. She decided early on not to question Ife about it because it's the only strange thing about her, the only thing that hints at why she'd be working a job like this and not in an office with a water cooler and a cubicle, like a hairline crack in a porcelain teacup. Cora is afraid that if she picks at it too much, Ife will start looking at her instead, asking questions. And Cora won't have answers, because Cora isn't a person, not really. She's been thinking a lot about obituaries lately, how her own would be short and impersonal. Cora Zeng, 24, of Manhattan, passed away on insert date and place of death, preceded in death by her sister, Delilah Zeng. That's all she can come up with, because if Cora died today, she would die being nothing more than Delilah's sister, the only fact that matters. She's tried to metamorphosize herself into someone else. A box beneath her bed is stuffed with yarn from when she tried to be the kind of person who crochets. Her bookshelf is mostly cookbooks from when she attempted to be the kind of person who likes cooking. And of course, there was that night she watched intricate nail art videos until dawn. But everything sloughs off Cora like dead skin because she's not the kind of person who creates things, who makes a mark on the world. She is an echo, quieter and quieter until she's nothing at all. She's got trophies with wings, Ife says. Who? 可与西, Ife says, in her perfect accent that puts Cora and Harvey to shame, because Ife isn't an ABC. She was actually born in China. She won't tell them what part, though. Every time Cora asks, she says a different place. Sometimes it's Shanghai, other times Guangzhou, and sometimes it's just a place so small you wouldn't recognize the name. It's the caduceus, Cora says. When Harvey and Ife don't answer, she continues. The symbol for medicine. She was a doctor. Cora knows this because there was a pager on the bathroom counter beeping wildly, but it got covered in blood, and blood equals biohazard, so into the trash it went. She off herself? Ife says. Cora shrugs because that's not the kind of information the police tell the cleanup crew. But Cora saw the broken lock on the front door, so she very much doubts it was suicide. Then, of course, there's the other reason. The one Cora doesn't want to let float around in her mind too long, lest it latch on. The one that Harvey and Ife don't mention, so Cora won't either. Yu Shihe is the 5th Asian woman they've scraped off the walls this week, and it's only Wednesday. It wasn't always this way. When Cora first joined the dry cleaner turned corpse cleaner, there was an even spread of motorcycle accidents on the highway, and grandmas rotting for weeks in their attics, and the occasional drug deal gone wrong in a warehouse. But lately it's nothing but Asian women in their apartments, so much blood that it looks like someone repainted the walls red. Cora hopes it just means Harvey's uncle is focused on customers in Chinatown who pay him under the table, that it's a shift in business and not in crime. I'll ask Paul, Harvey says, stripping off his gloves and digging around for his phone, which he definitely isn't supposed to have in a room full of biohazards, but he's already typing in his passcode. Harvey has an EMT friend who fills him in on all the gory details and sometimes even sends him photos. On more than one occasion, Harvey has slipped printouts of body parts into Cora's and Ife's bags when they're not looking, impossibly convinced that they'll appreciate it as much as he would and are just too shy to admit it. Cora always tries to tear them up before she can see anything. Harvey pockets his phone, turns on the shower, angles the shower head so blood drips down the walls and pools in the bathtub. He takes out a sponge and steps into the tub, but sighs at what he sees. The water's not draining, Harvey says. There's too much fucking hair in the drain. Well, pull it out, Ife says. Harvey crosses his arms. Gross. You're standing in a bath of brain slop and you think hair is gross, Ife says. Who the hell doesn't think that's gross? Harvey says. Girls always leave hairballs as big as hamsters in the shower. Don't say that like you've ever lived with a girl, Ife says. A strange ringing begins in Cora's ears. She wants Harvey and Ife to stop arguing, so she squats down and sinks her glove into the murky swirl of blood water, pinching the hairball. It's denser than she expected, squishy through the numbness of her gloves. She tugs, but it stays lodged. Cora is braver than you, Ife says. Have I ever denied that? Harvey says. Cora pulls again, and the hairball slides out a little, but then catches again. A gush of fresh blood clouds the water, rushing from the drain. Cora readjusts her grip. The hairball is much bigger than she thought, thick enough to wrap her hand around like a cooked eggplant. Jesus, how much hair did that lady have? Harvey says. Cora tightens her hold and feels something crunch, even through her thick gloves. The realization that this is not a hairball makes her freeze. Cora, Ife says. But Cora needs to know now, because the unknowing is worse than knowing, and she gives another firm tug and the hairball dislodges. She pulls it above the surface of the water and it expands all at once, a black mass growing, unfolding in jagged edges, a slack jaw, and tiny teeth. And that's where I'll stop.
You're so cruel. You're so cruel. Oh my god. Oh my. Oh god. Is it weird that my first reaction was like, I kind of want to eat eggplant?
Ew, yeah. Nice hairy eggplant.
Oh, nice hairy eggplant.
That's so funny.
Guys, I cannot thank you enough. It is, I mean, it is a genuine pleasure to hear you share your work. And I don't know, like these are dark books, but I feel like they are kind of anchored in such a honest emotion that I feel like you really, like me as the reader, like I'm compelled to follow these characters all the way through their descent, you know, wherever they come out on the other end, like I'm there with them. And I think it's a testament to your writing. Like these are some wonderful books, and I really, really hope that, you know, for those of you listening out there, that you pick them up. Rekt by Alex Gonzalez is on shelves now. Bat Eater and Other Names by Cora Zeng by Kylie Lee Baker is out in the UK and will be out in the US on April 29th.
Yeah.
My God. And you heard it here first, folks. An exclusive. We're not going to talk about that other podcast. Whoever they may be, we got it first. Guys, I can't thank you enough. Thank you for spending your time with us. The things you do to your readers, it's brutal. It's unforgiving. No,
thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, this was awesome. This was so fun. It was so
lots of fun.
Yeah.
Great.
I think this is the perfect pairing. It's kind of like oranges and eggplants. Like you want to
Yes.
kind of like have them together. Two great tastes that are hairy and bloody and go great together. Thanks, guys. Have a wonderful, wonderful night.
You too.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Thank you.